This will be the third class we've had. Let's review a little bit from the last few weeks before we take our weekly quiz. This time we not only have craisins, we have white grapes, dehydrated, shriveled raisins, whatever you call them. There are 4 great questions that people try to answer, and all religions try to answer. Who can name any of those questions? Who am I? Another one. Where am I going? Where did I come from? There we go. And where am I going when I die? There you go. Who else got one? Back there, did he get one? Okay. Oh. So those are 4 great questions. Every religion tries to answer those. The 3 lies that Satan told to Eve, who can name any of those? Deny God's Word, and then what? Cause doubts about God's Word, and deify mankind. Was that Steve? Got that one? All right, there we go. Let's see. How many times in Ezekiel did Lucifer say, I will? 5 times. Man, this guy's on the ball. You like raisins? He didn't have supper or something, or what? Okay. Let's see, that'll be for tonight. Then last week we talked about the quiz, the different types of, we covered for the quiz tonight, the different meanings of the word evolution. I had a debate a couple days, yesterday, where was I? Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, and I debated a professor up there. I've learned that if I have 2 more debates coming up scheduled. If you start off defining what you mean by the word evolution, the argument's basically over, because there are 6 different meanings to the word, and this is something we'll be quizzed on tonight. Cosmic evolution, that would be the origin of time, space, and matter, i.e., the Big Bang. They have no evidence for this at all, but they believe it happened. After that, the Big Bang supposedly produced hydrogen, which then you'd have to have billions of years of chemical evolution. Now, what I'm doing now in my timeline, on here, I start off not only with my 20 billion year timeline, I add cosmic evolution would be here, and then you'd have chemical evolution somewhere in here. After that, you'd have to have stellar and planetary evolution. The stars and planets would have to form. Nobody's ever seen that happen, but they believe that it did. And then you finally get to number 4, which is organic evolution. Now you have to get the origin of life. Life has to get started from non-living material. Most textbooks, it's hilarious to watch, they'll spend a whole chapter talking about Francisco Redi and Louis Pasteur, saying how life cannot come from non-living material. Then the next chapter, it says, however, we believe life came from non-living material. I just say, don't you see what you just did? Organic evolution would have to be here. Then you'd have to have macroevolution, which is changes between different kinds of animals. And finally, you get to microevolution. Now, that one is scientific. The rest of them are pure religion. They just don't happen. And they're always arguing about, where's the border between micro and macro? I say, well, I don't know, and that's a good field of study. We ought to be working on that. However, that doesn't prove the other 5 are part of evolution. I now use the term, I say they smuggled these other ones in when nobody was looking. They smuggle in micro. Microevolution is a fact, but they smuggle in the rest of them as if it is part of science, and it's certainly not. Okay, we also talked about, in 1933, a very famous document was written called the Humanist Manifesto. One of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto was a fellow named John Dewey. John Dewey had was one of the most influential people in the world, at least in America, when it comes to public education. John Dewey, a humanist, and he went to Vermont to the Teachers College and just led a secret, quiet revolution, so to speak, in training teachers who later became principals and deans at colleges. And basically our education system was taken over by the humanist philosophy, largely because of the work of a guy named John Dewey. There's a Latin phrase that means single spoken sentence. What is that Latin phrase? Universe, right, interesting. The evolutionists are always talking about the universe. Say, do you know what that means? Single spoken sentence. God said, let there be. Well, who remembers last week some of the problems with the Big Bang Theory? What does it not explain? Doesn't explain where the matter came from. What else? Where did the energy come from? Where the laws come from. Why do we have clumps of matter called galaxies and zillions of miles of nothing in between? I mean, if the Big Bang Theory were true, matter should be evenly distributed. And it's not. And retrograde motion. Everything's not spinning the same direction. Those are some of the problems with the Big Bang Theory. Okay, any questions? Also, we covered the word thermodynamics. Who remembers what that means? Heat for thermometer, and dynamics for power. Dynamite means heat power. And there are basically two laws of thermodynamics. One says things can't create themselves. Second one says everything's falling apart. We don't see anything improving. Somehow they think if you just add energy, things will improve. Well, the sun adds energy all the time to the earth, but it doesn't improve anything. It destroys everything. Except one thing is able to use the sun's energy: chlorophyll. If it weren't for that, the sun would destroy everything on earth. You can't use the sunlight. You can't turn it into energy. Only chlorophyll in plants can do that. All right. This week we're going to talk about what can the public schools teach about creation. There's an awful lot of misinformation going around out there. I get faxes and emails and letters all the time, especially about after what happened in Kansas. How many heard about that when Kansas said, we're not going to require macroevolution to be taught? Boy, the evolutionists came unglued. There's articles in the paper, letters to the editor. CNN has a whole section on their website about how Kansas is going to go back to the Dark Ages now. Very interesting. Let me explain what the truth is and what the law is about this. As far as anybody can figure out, there are only two options. Somebody created the world, or the world created itself. Now, there are some who say, well, no, the world's always been here. Now, hold it. That violates the first and second laws of thermodynamics. One guy wrote me an email last week, and he said, don't you think God could have created a universe that was always here? I said, think about what you're saying. If he created it, it wasn't always here. You have a contradiction of terms here. Sure, God can do what he wants, but the laws tell us the universe could not have always existed. It is winding down, so there had to be a beginning. So basically, the only two reasonable options are somebody made it, or it made itself, evolution. Now, what should the schools teach? I get asked this question very frequently. Do you think we should teach creation in public schools? And I think it's a good question, and that's what we're going to discuss tonight. However, there's another question we should ask first. Should we have public schools? Boy, they come unglued when you even ask that question. But that really is a valid question. What right does the government have to get involved in educating your children? That goes off onto a long rabbit trail we could chase. We will forego that tonight, about the straw man that they create. We've got a videotape on that. You can call our office about the straw man. That explains all that topic if you'd like. But assuming we cannot stop the public school system by tomorrow, what should they teach in the public schools? Well, for one, the schools should teach the truth. They should teach science. If it's a science class, you teach science. What do we know? You can teach biology. Okay, kid, this is the biceps, this is the triceps, these are the extenders, these are the flexors, the radius, the ulna, the humerus, the deltoid. You can teach all the muscles, and then when they say, well, teacher, how did they get that way? Oh, we're not allowed to discuss that. You don't have to get into origins to teach science. It's unnecessary. Okay, kid, here's the different rocks. Learn the names of all these minerals, learn the hardness test. Here's geometry, here's mathematics, You can study all of the sciences without getting into the origins issue at all. No matter what you teach on origins, somebody's going to be upset. Right? If you teach God did it, the atheists are going to be upset. If you teach God didn't do it, now the Christians are going to be upset. It's a no-win situation. So the ideal solution is for schools to not be involved in teaching origins at all. Just teach science, period. That would be second level question. First level is, should we even have these schools? Okay, since we have them, okay, what should they do? There's an awful lot of misinformation going around saying, the evolutionists write articles and say, you can't teach creation in the public schools. Well, now just hold on a minute. Let me explain what happened, give you the history. In 1925, several states passed laws saying you cannot teach evolution. It was against the law to teach evolution. They never mentioned anything about creation. It was assumed you would teach creation. All the schools were teaching it. 1925, there was a famous trial. This will be a quiz question. When was the Scopes trial? This book is word for word, verbatim, everything that happened in the Scopes trial, called 1925. What happened in 1925, the ACLU ran an ad in the paper all over Tennessee saying, we're looking for a teacher who's willing to admit he taught evolution and test this new law because we think we can defeat the law. They had to advertise to find a teacher who would do the case for them. A bunch of guys got together in Dayton, Tennessee at a drugstore and said, you know, we need to put Dayton on the map. Our town's a little sleepy town in the mountains of Tennessee and nobody's ever heard of us. Let's see if we can find a teacher who will claim he taught evolution. So they got this teacher named John Scopes, S-C-O-P-E-S. John Scopes substituted teaching biology a couple of days while the regular biology teacher was gone. So they brought John into the drugstore and said, John, would you be willing to claim you taught evolution? He said, well, I don't know if I taught it or not. He said, I just filled in the class for the teacher who was absent for a few days. He said, well, we need you to claim you taught evolution so that we can put you on trial, so that you can be found guilty of teaching evolution, so that we can show how dumb this law is. So the ACLU staged this whole thing. Clarence Darrow, a famous lawyer at the time, atheist lawyer, he came down to defend John Scopes. His real purpose was to try to make the Christians look stupid and to try to get this law overturned. And so William Jennings Bryan came down, who had been four-time vice presidential candidate, a very famous politician, a tremendous speaker, and a great Christian, and a great enemy of the evolutionists. William Jennings Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N. After the trial was over, Bryan died a few days later, and they started a college in his honor in Dayton, Tennessee, Bryan College. A good Christian college up there in Dayton, Tennessee, just north of Chattanooga, about maybe 80 miles or so. Okay? So Bryan College is named after William Jennings Bryan, the famous orator who defended the Christians in this trial. The trial lasted about 10 days in the middle of the heat, extremely hot, no air conditioning in 1925, and everybody, when you read about the trial, it's an amazing book to read. You can get this from Bryan College, get the book from them. This is listed in my seminar notebook in the yellow page, or in the blue pages, references, which you have here in front of you. You can find, should you decide to get this book, I should find it real quickly, page 57 or 8, I think, about schools. No, looks like, what page? 57 covers it. Yeah, well, okay. Page 57, first column. The world famous, why don't I see it on there? Okay, right-hand column, 57, world's most famous court trial. Good reading. What's happened, after this trial was over, the atheists lost. The judge found the teacher guilty. The atheists tried in this trial, and the evolutionists tried to bring in all sorts of testimony about how evolution is true. They were going to bring in the Nebraska man. Later it was proven that all they found was a pig's tooth. They found one tooth and made a whole missing link out of it, the Nebraska man. And that was going to be one of their key bits of evidence to bring in Nebraska man. Early in the trial, when they had all these witnesses lined up, they were lined up to come in and teach, evolution is a fact and all scientists believe in it. I believe it was William Jennings Bryan or his son, who was also there helping William Jennings Bryan, the Christian, said, Your Honor, whether evolution is a fact doesn't matter. That's not what this trial is about. This trial is simply, did he break the law or not? And so they just, with one fell swoop, they undercut all of the work these guys had done to try to bring in evidence for evolution. And the judge said, you're right, it doesn't matter. We're not here to try whether evolution is true or not. We're here to try, did he break the law or not? And turned out he was guilty. He was fined $100, which was the minimum fine under the law at the time. And several people volunteered to pay the fine, but even that fine was overturned on appeal. It went to an appellate court, and there's some little technicality, and they threw the fine out. So nothing happened. It remained illegal to teach evolution in many states up until 1968. In 1968, the last law banning evolution was overturned. At no time ever throughout any of this was there any question about teaching creation. It's always been fine to teach creation in the public school. There has never been a law against that. Finally, even though it was against the law to teach evolution, many states were teaching it anyway. They just stuck it in the books. And the problem really was with the textbook publishers and with the teachers and school boards who are ordering these books that teach evolution. But so it was taught, even though there were laws against it, it was still being taught, regardless of what the law said. Then, in 1981, I believe, or somewhere around there, Arkansas passed a law that said, if you teach evolution, you must teach creation. In the early 80s, I should look up the date, but it doesn't matter. It won't be on the quiz. Arkansas passed a law that says, it was called the balanced treatment. Hey, if you're going to teach our kids evolution, we demand you also teach creation. Which many people thought was very reasonable. Hey, if you're going to teach one, let's teach the other. Let's try to make everybody happy. ACLU came in and challenged that law and said, if you force teachers to teach creation, that's a violation of the First Amendment. And a judge named Overton at the 8th Circuit Court, I believe in Little Rock, Arkansas, it was in Arkansas where it ended up, I believe it's Little Rock. Judge Overton said, you cannot demand the teachers teach creation. Period. Now, they did not say you can't teach creation. What they said is, you cannot demand that they teach creation. Big difference, right? You could still teach creation if you wanted. All they said was, this law, which forces the teachers to teach creation, is unconstitutional. And believe it or not, it probably was a reasonable decision on the part of the judge. So Louisiana wrote a law a few years later and said, same kind of thing, we want equal time. If you're going to teach evolution, you must teach creation. That, of course, was tested by the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, okay, you cannot demand they teach creation. However, Supreme Court said, they can teach creation if they want. We just cannot force them to teach creation. So what's happening is an awful lot of misinformation going around out there. A lot of the evolutionist groups and atheist groups are saying, see, the court said you can't teach creation. Oh, that's not what they said at all. The court said the states cannot force the teachers to teach creation. And you need to understand that difference because that is vital. You've always been allowed to teach creation in public schools. I speak in them all the time. There's never been a law against teaching creation. There's never been a law against teaching the Bible in a public school. There never has been a law. Institute for Creation Research, ICR, in California, publishes this little document every month. One comes out. They call it Impact articles. They're 10 cents a piece. You can get on their mailing list if you call this phone number and ask, say, put me on your mailing list. I believe it's free of charge. Their phone, pardon? Yeah, it's free. Their phone number is 619-448-0900. And just say, put me on your mailing list, and they'll send you stuff every month. Actually, they've been doing this since 1974, these little articles they put out, at 10 cents a piece, once a month. You can go back and get all of the back issues for about $35. And it is tremendous reading. If you want to get an awesome resource to keep you busy for months, those are great articles. This one is article number 196. I believe as of today they're up to number 350 or something like that. So figure $35 should get you all the back issues, clear from 1974. This one talks about how you can teach creation science in the classroom. You may want to get some of these and order 100 copies from them and give them out to all the teachers you know. If you have some influence on teachers in your area, give them one. Most teachers are afraid to teach creation because they think the law says they can't do it. And they're just misinformed. You can teach creation. In 1963, when prayer was taken out of the schools, how many remember that case with Madalyn Murray O'Hair? They took a mandatory prayer out of our schools. That's what happened. It was mandatory prayer that was removed. Prayer wasn't removed. Only mandatory prayer. Big difference. 1963, the Supreme Court said, it certainly may be said that the Bible is worthy of study for its literary and historic qualities. Nothing we have said here indicates that such study of the Bible or of religion, when presented objectively as part of a secular program of education, may be effected consistently with the First Amendment. This is the School District of Abington Township and Schempp versus Schempp, 374 U.S. 203, blah, blah, blah. 1963 Supreme Court case. They said clearly, you can teach the Bible if you want. And there's some ill-informed ignoramuses running around out there saying, hey, you can't teach the Bible in public schools and you can't talk about creation in public schools, I'm sorry, you are mistaken. 1980, Supreme Court ruled again in the case Stone v. Graham. They said the Bible may constitutionally be used in an appropriate study of history, civilization, ethics, comparative religion, or the like. You want to teach the Bible? Have at it. There's no law against that. 1980, the Eighth Circuit Court ruled, and they said, you can teach the Bible and have religious elements in your school as long as it advances the student's knowledge and appreciation of the role our religious heritage has played in the social, structural, and historical development of civilization. If you're a teacher in a public school, you can bring the Bible in and say, kids, okay, let's study let's read this passage out of the Bible and see what this did for our nation. You're studying historical documents. It's a book like any other book. You don't need to be afraid of it. I mean, I shouldn't say it's a book like any other book, but as far as the school goes, you can read the Bible. Don't let somebody tell you you can't. If they tell you you can't read the Bible in a school, they're ignorant of the law. But here is what has happened. The ACLU will threaten to sue. Now, they would lose the suit, and they know it. But it doesn't matter. The threat of a lawsuit will cause the average principal to say, we can't afford a lawsuit. Teachers, quit teaching creation. So it's the principal that is stopping it. It's not the courts. It's not the law. It becomes a local policy. Because we got gutless principals and gutless school board members who won't stand up to the people just because of the fear of a lawsuit, which goes back to what Jesus said, the love of money, root of all evil. In 1987, Supreme Court ruled again. This was the Louisiana case. Louisiana case was finally ruled on in 1987 by the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court said, among other things, they said, we cannot force, they did say the Louisiana law is unconstitutional because the law demanded equal time. They said, hey, you can't force the teachers to teach creation. However, they said, teachers already possess the flexibility to present a variety of scientific theories about the origins of mankind. They are free to teach any and all facets of this subject. Teaching a variety of scientific theories about the origins of mankind might be done with the clear secular intent of enhancing the effectiveness of science instruction. All of these court cases are spelled out in your seminar notebook, which you have in front of you, in the yellow pages. Question number 11, which starts on page 74 of this current edition of the book we're using for this class. So if you want to show this to somebody, if somebody says you can't teach creation in school, all the laws are right here in this section on what can you do in a public school. So you can read it all. Everything I'm showing you on the screen here is right there in your book. Okay? California State Board of Education, this is also in here on page 11, said, discussions of any scientific fact, hypothesis, or theory related to origins of the universe, the earth, and of life, that is the how, are appropriate to the science curriculum. Now tell me, if you were a teacher in California and you read that, would you assume you can teach creation if you want? Certainly you can. Now, the teachers cannot try to force the kid to become a Baptist or a Catholic or a Buddhist, okay? They cannot use taxpayers' dollars to try to convert people to their religion, but they can certainly present, hey kids, here's one view. They can read the Bible to them. And I get sick and tired of these people going around saying, see, the court said you can't teach creation in schools. Show me where the court said that, please. The court has never said that. They couldn't say that. That would be a violation of the First Amendment right there. You got the freedom of speech. The teachers do too. You don't give up your constitutional rights when you walk across the door to the classroom. This book we sell through our ministry, Teaching Creation Science in Public Schools, by Dwayne Gish, who's one of the vice presidents at Institute for Creation Research, is a great book that you can give out to teachers, $4.75 through our ministry. You might also want to get a hold of the Ridenours, their phone number there, and all this information is in the yellow pages of your notebook here. They are helping people start Bible classes in public schools. Many states have them, 20 or 30, I don't remember now, but you can have a Bible class as an elective in your public school. Your preacher comes to become the teacher. It's really amazing the latitude we have, but very few people do it. We all sit back and say, oh, public schools are going bad. Well, get in there and do something about it. Fix it. If you say, oh, my car's not running good, well, tune it up. Fix it. For heaven's sake, do something about it. So these two items on this one slide are not necessarily connected to each other, but the written hours will help you get a Bible class started in your public school. Perfectly fine. ACLU wants to get creation out of schools. I think there's a much bigger picture of why they want it out of schools. Without going too far down this rabbit trail now, we'll get into that later on Seminar Part 5. If the creation theory is true, then there's a creator, obviously. If there's a creator, we might have rights that come from the creator. Our founding fathers said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. The rights, we have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We have all sorts of rights, and those rights came from God. The government didn't give you that right. God gave you that right. Well, suppose you would like to have a new world order, a one-world government with Hillary in charge or something, okay? If you have this idea that you want a one-world government, you want everybody thinking that you have authority to give them right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You don't want folks thinking they've got rights that come from God. If you get a bunch of folks together that believe their rights come from God, those people don't make good slaves. They're going to throw the tea in the harbor and rebel against the king, right? Which is what happened in 1775. So, evolution teaching is essential for communism. Communism falls apart without evolution. The founder of the ACLU, Roger Baldwin, said, communism is the goal. They're going to use lawyers and lawsuits to bring in communism. That's the ultimate plan. And I tell folks jokingly, it stands for the American Communist Lawyers Union. It's actually the American Civil Liberties Union. But it is a communist organization. Now, that does not mean all the lawyers in the ACLU are communists. Many of them probably don't even know that the foundation of their organization is the promotion of communism. But Roger Baldwin said, that's the purpose, folks. We're going to try to bring in communism. And so they're using the legal system to try to intimidate schools into not teaching creation, because creation is one of the biggest hindrances to communism. If there's a creator, well then, he tells us what to do. And countries like Russia, Ukraine, these former communist countries, they're still communist, by the way, nothing's really changed, but they have to have evolution. I've heard missionaries say that they were in countries like when China was taken over by the communists. The missionaries said the first thing that the communists came in there, they didn't teach communism. They got all the kids together and began teaching evolution. First thing is evolution, and then we'll teach them about communism later. It happens in every place where a communist country is taken over, where a country is taken over by communism. They have to teach evolution first. So, as far as what you can do in a public school, we've got several books, one by the Gablers, here about teaching. What are they teaching our children? If you do want to get involved in textbook selection, we'll get into more of this on video number 4 at the end. But Mel Gabler in Longview, Texas, and his information's in the blue pages in here about the schools. Their phone number is also in the back of the book right here. If you want to get, by the way, area code changed. We're not fixing that in these. We need to. 903. Just make a note to have them do that. Area codes are changing all over the country, after the book was printed. But the Gablers, have for 38 or 39 years, have been researching and reading every public school textbook that is printed, or nearly all of them, and writing a critique on it, finding mistakes. So if you get on your textbook selection committee and would like to save an awful lot of time, when you're given the books to decide from, get a hold of the Gablers and say, here's our list, which one do you recommend? They've already read them all. Good Christian organization in Longview, Texas. You might also want to get this little booklet. They're $3 each from the Rutherford Institute about students' rights in public education. Just what does the law say? Students actually have a lot more rights than teachers do. Students can write papers about creation. They can write papers about the Bible. They can, during speech class, they could give a sermon. It's unreal the rights the students have. And the students have to learn to use a magic word. If a student wants to write a paper about, if the teacher says, okay, write a paper about a controversial subject, and they say, I'm going to write it about creation. I get calls all the time. People say, I need some help. I want to write a paper about this. And the teacher will say, no, you can't write about this topic. You need to learn a magic phrase. This will get by every time. You say, teacher, are you discriminating against me because of my religious belief? That's the magic sentence right there. Are you discriminating against me because of my religious belief? That's all you got to say. Oh, no, we're not discriminating. Okay, well, then I think I'll write it on creation. Okay, go ahead. Because they're scared stiff of that discrimination word. That's the big one, the big D word that scares them. Because there's lots of lawsuits over that. We also have a book called Students' Legal Rights on a public school campus. This one is all the more detail about the laws, which, for instance, on page 53, it explains that students have the right to be exempt from any class that is teaching something contrary to their religion. Now think what that means. If your kids are going to the public school and you don't want them taught evolution, all you need to do is go down to the school, to the principal, or to the teacher and say, I would do it in writing, and you might want to send it certified mail, so you got proof they got a copy. Spell it out clearly. I do not want my child taught evolution. This is contrary to our religion. I do not want my students taught sex education. This is contrary to my religion, or whatever it is you don't want them taught. The school then has to give them alternative material, and they cannot count their grade off. If they do, you have grounds for a lawsuit. This is how the atheists are getting all their goals accomplished. They're suing for the dumbest things, you know. I'm not saying we ought to be sue happy, but we ought to stand up for our rights. Remember when in Acts chapter 16, when Peter was beaten, they threw him in the jail, he got the Philippian jailer saved. At the end of the story, the leaders in the town said, okay, go tell those guys they can leave now. Paul said, it wasn't Peter, it was Paul. Paul said, forget it. They beat us openly, uncondemned, being Romans. You tell them to come down and apologize publicly. Right? We need some of the moxie that Paul had to say, let's just, forget it. I'm not going to roll over and let you beat me. I want a public apology. And I think it's time that Christians, in Christian love and with wisdom from the Lord, we need to use the legal system. They were tying Paul up, going to beat him one time, and he said, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. I appeal to Caesar. Scared them all half to death, didn't it? What's wrong with that? Okay? Let's stand up for what's right. And students need to know they do have the right to be exempt from classes that are teaching something contrary to their religion. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus said, whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone be hanged about his neck. Any teacher that's teaching kids evolution, obviously that's going to destroy their faith in the Bible. And anyone that destroys a child's faith better carefully read what Jesus said. You'd be better off drowned in the depth of the sea. I would hate to stand before God and say, God, I was a teacher in the school and I ruined the faith of the kids that came through my class. But that's what's going to happen Judgment Day, folks, to many people. That's going to be a fearful thing to fall into the hands of an angry God. And I think we need to warn the teachers that are teaching evolution that they're going to face God's judgment someday for this. They're not the enemy. The devil is the enemy. Shortly after this trial, the world's most famous court trial in Dayton, Tennessee, the atheists realized they didn't get any publicity like they wanted. So some different groups started making movies or plays. They traveled around the country putting on a play called Inherit the Wind. Has anybody ever heard of that one? That'll be a quiz question. Write that one down, Heidi. Inherit the Wind was a play put on, and there are several different versions of it. And there's a movie now that's been made called Inherit the Wind. The purpose of the movie is to make the Christians look stupid. And they don't use exactly the same names, but it's very obviously based on this trial, 1925. There are lots of people who've written reviews of the play showing all the inconsistencies compared to the real trial. All you need to do is watch the movie, Inherit the Wind, and read the book, and you'll say, well, they changed hundreds of things in there just to make the Christians look stupid. And that movie, Inherit the Wind, is playing in public schools all over America every day. And all it does is make the kids think that the atheists are smart and the Christians are dumb. And if they're showing that in your school, you ought to object, because that's very biased. Okay? Let me give you just a little bit of history of what happened. Back in America, all through its history, there was very little evolution in the textbooks, After this trial, there began to be a little bit more after 1925. By 1950, though, there still was only 2,000 or 3,000 words about evolution in the average textbook. It didn't teach it very much. These charts here are in your seminar notebook in the chart section, which I believe is, let's see, charts. Page 45 is where they start, at least in this edition. I hate to put this on tape that it's on page 45 because somebody's going to get this after we've gone. We're on our 20th edition right now and no end in sight. Okay, page 48 is where it is in your book here. Okay. In 1957, something very important happened. The space race was on. Does anybody know who got the first satellite up and what the name of it was? Sputnik, they call it, right? In Russian, Sputnik. We always call it Sputnik over here. The Soviets launched the Sputnik. It was kind of a dud as far as satellite goes. It went up, lasted a short time, and fell back down. But the fact is, they got something into orbit before we did. So the humanists and evolutionists and communists in America decided this would be great to use as propaganda to show that Americans are behind in science because we're not teaching evolution. You follow that? So there began to be news articles and letters to the editor, and see, America's losing the space race because we're not teaching enough evolution. Now, what does evolution have to do with putting a satellite up? Nothing. But they said, this shows that the Soviet science is ahead of us because Soviets have been teaching evolution for years. And we weren't teaching much. Then in 1959, another important event happened. So 1957, you need to know that for the quiz, Sputnik was launched, and people used that as an excuse to say American science was inferior. 1959 was the 100-year anniversary of Darwin's book coming out. Darwin's book was published in 1859, and a 100-year anniversary, a bunch of atheists and evolutionists got together and had a big symposium and said, you know what, we still don't have much evolution in the textbooks. This theory's been around for 100 years. We all know it's true. This is their thinking, okay? But we're still not teaching it to the kids. So in the late 50s, there was a very concerted effort to get more evolution into the schools. And in the late 50s, as far as I can figure out, the first time in the history of America, a government grant was issued to produce textbooks. Up until that time, if you wanted to write a biology textbook, have at it. You can write any book you want, and then you try to get somebody to buy it. It was the free market system. I could write a book, somebody else could write a book, we could both send it to the school, please buy our book, and the school would decide. Or the teacher would decide, or the school board decide, or somebody would decide which book to buy. But now the government produced textbooks, at least with government funding. It was called the BSCS series. Write that one down, you'll need that. BSCS. I'll show you some of the books here throughout the course. The BSCS series was the first book that as far as I can figure out in my study of this, that really pushed evolution to the hilt. In 1963, there were 33,000 words about evolution in the average textbook. Just from the late 50s to the early 60s, evolution took over everything as far as the philosophy goes for our school system. Jumped from 2,000 to 3,000 to 33,000 just in a few years.